So just a few words about Origin. So we are a non-governmental organization. We are based in Geneva, and we represent the Global Alliance of GI Groups. Today we have some 600 associations from 60 countries around the world. And basically you can see here that it's also symbolic how the GI concept, which is very strong, of course, in the European Union, but is becoming more and more a global concept. So you have geographical indications, you have groups all over the world. And what we do, in particular at Origin, we campaign for solid protection of geographical indication at the national, regional, international level. This means that each time there is a national legislation which is discussed in a country, or there is a bilateral treaty, a multilateral treaty which might affect GI, we provide inputs in order to persuade policymakers to provide the most solid possible protection to GIs. And also, as we have been growing in terms of members, we have become a platform within which GI groups and other institutions can share experience, best practices, and all information that might help those actors. And actually, it's in this framework that I'll give you my presentation today, because we have seen in the European Union, there were also examples in Latin America of successful GIs. You know, they increase the product sale value, they increase production, they give job opportunities, they provide job opportunities in disadvantaged areas. It's a way to prevent rural exodus, you preserve the tradition, and also through a geographical indication, you can produce spillover effects in other sectors, gastronomy, tourism. You know, all people get to know a product and they want to visit the area, to know the people, to know all the environment, and to enjoy an overall experience. But those effects are not automatic. It's not that by the fact of establishing a GI, not automatically you will have those effects. So in our, I would say, privileged position to see an experience from so many countries around the world, we come to the conclusion that, you know, there are some key factors for success. And of course, first of all, you need a specific quality, which is linked to a geographical environment. I mean, geographical indication is not a mere marketing tool that you can just attach to commercialize any product. You need a specific quality, which is the result of people with specific skills, is a result of a specific climate, is a result of raining conditions, soil characteristics. Okay, so this is crucial. And then you need, and we have seen with the previous presentations, the importance of a solid protection, a legal framework which protects GIs. This is fundamental. And then you need a collective approach. And by the way, this is not just like to be considered one after the other one, but I would like to pass the message that they have to be considered as a sort of, from day one, when you look at the geographical indication, you have to have in mind all of these factors. This will be my key message. So you need a collective approach, meaning that it's not just the effort of a single company or a single producer, is a community in a territory. They have to work for it. And then you need a system of controls, which basically sort of independent system of control, which makes sure that the promise you make to the consumers in terms of the specific qualities is truly delivered. And then over the last few years, we have included a new element, which is the sustainability, which is a big topic, and maybe we don't have the time to enter into the details, but also the pandemic of this last year has basically reinforced this need to look at an economic model which produces, of course, job opportunities for people, but in the respect of some social principles and environmental considerations. So it's important more and more to include sustainability criteria into a geographical indication because, first of all, you are in an ideal position as a GI because you are part of a community to consider these sustainability factors. Secondly, because there is a moral obligation, more and more vis-a-vis future generations. And third, because it's becoming a commercial element in the sense that consumers, especially the millennials, the young generations, more and more they look at what's the real impact of a product on its territory, on the environment, on the community, how people are remunerated, participation of women, and so on and so forth. So I think the GIs have already a lot of this. They have to, of course, stress the message, but also at some point, eventually also to improve the sustainability performance. But I'll come to that. So the circularity of those success factors, that's my key message. So you cannot just consider those elements I mentioned to you in isolation. From day one, when there is like a political will, a commercial will in a community with the support of public authorities to go for a GI, all of these elements have to be considered. So, of course, the legal protection normally is already there. The majority of countries around the world now have a sui generis system, but the quality linked to a geographical environment has to be there because you have to write a product specification. The association of producers should be there. That's fundamental because with no association of producers, with no collective approach, there is no success. The controls have to be there for credibility and also sustainability elements. Debate about what the society is demanding in terms of sustainability and how the GI can respond to that. So these are like, the characteristics that how do you link a product to the environment? Of course, you can carry out studies, history, but this, the producers normally, they know that already. In fact, we like to say at Origin that you don't ask for registration of a GI, but you ask for recognition, which seems to us a more appropriate term in the sense that you recognize something that pre-exists, okay? The legal system. The majority now of jurisdictions around the world have a sui generis system, which fully considers GIs an intellectual property right, separate from trademarks. There are just a few countries that still use trademarks. But you need a solid protection. It has been mentioned, the concept of evocation by Giorgio. That's important because GI producers normally are small economic actors. So giving a solid protection helps them because normally they don't have financial resources and access to legal advice. But that is not enough. A legislation is not enough. You need the proactive role of IP offices that might, of course, based on the law applicable in the jurisdiction, they can refuse as much as possible trademarks application in conflict with GIs in order to prevent groups from having to oppose any applications, which means money and resources. Then in some cases, like in the European Union level, which we believe it's a very strong institutional factor, you might have an enforcement agency that can help, at least for the most evident violations of the law, can apply some sort of, to some extent, administrative protection. And also, there is a possibility to support GI groups to get protection in third countries via, for instance, a bilateral agreement or a multilateral agreement. Just, Giorgio has already mentioned, I don't want to spend much time on evocation, but Parmesan was an evocation, was considered in the European Union an evocation of Parmigiano Reggiano. The concept has been stretched up to the point that even certain figurative element of a packaging of a product or of a trademark can be considered an evocation. Here, this is a cheese product, which is identified as Super Ronzinante, with the image of a horse, of the mills, and was produced in Spain, in the area of Manchego. La Mancha without respecting the product specification of queso manchego. So the combination of those elements, figurative, which as the most participants are from Latin America, so the Don Quixote book is very known. So this has been considered, the combination of all those elements has been considered a figurative evocation of the PDO queso manchego. So this concept is very strong. At the origin, we have seen that other jurisdictions like India, even if they do not contain specifically the term protection against evocation, they came to the same conclusions with respect, for instance, considering some evocation of Scotch whiskey, for instance, based on the use of figurative elements of terms like Glen, which are not directly related to Scotch whiskey, but are typical of the Celtic language, so they might refer, plus are part of several Scotch whiskey trademarks. Anyway, very strong concept. I think it should be, in our view, should be applied as much as possible. And of course, even if you don't have that concept in your legislation, you might come as well to the same conclusion through case law. Enforcement, I mentioned to you this aspect, Article 36 of the European Regulation 1151/2012, as the specific article, point B, which establishes every single EU member state has to create an enforcement agency. They work at different levels. Some of them are very proactive, others are not so proactive. There is a need to streamline and make sure everybody has a minimum level of activity. But this is a very powerful element which might help producers at least to remove from the market the most evident violations of the geographical indications. Of course, an evocation like this, you need to wait for a judge to make an evaluation. This cannot be done ex officio on the first time. Once the judgment has been given, then the agency could remove future similar, let's say, packaging. But just to give you the idea how an enforcement agency could operate. GI protection in third market, again, here as well, the institutional framework might help because the GI groups, if they are strong, national GI groups, for instance, Consejo Regulador del Tequila, Federación de Cafeteros de Colombia, they are both members of origin, they can do direct registrations of their GIs in Europe, in Japan, in other markets. Then a country can help with the bilateral agreements, like the ones of Peru, Colombia, and Bolivia with the European Union, an exchange of lists, and very interesting. And I encourage all of you to look, all the public authorities present, to see also the great benefits of the WIPO Geneva Act of the Lisbon Agreement, because has modernized the Lisbon Agreement, to which already, for instance, Peru was a member, but it has, with the accession of the European Union, it has already some 30 member states. And we know here from Geneva that several other governments are considering accession. So this could become a truly international registry for GIs, which will allow, with just one application, which is done by the competent authority, so every state has to identify a public authority, will then have protection in all, potentially in all the other member states, including now the European Union, which is already a member. Then, of course, the strong role, when we come to the collective approach, the role of an association is crucial. I reiterate this. At the moment of registration, of recognition of a GI, already a group should be in existence. Because not just to make the application, sometimes in some legislation, the state is the owner of the right. But we believe that an association which is authorized by the state to carry out certain activities should be there from day one, because after registration, then you do legal protection. You have to fight infringements. Not everything can be done ex officio. And then, much better than me, will explain Paola from Café de Colombia, all the promotional activities you can do through an association, and you share cost, you put resources, and then producers will have a service back, plus activities like the protection, the promotion of the name. And this is, for instance, is well in the European legislation, is quite clear. GI groups are at the core of the system. They have to apply for recognition, or registration is the term used in the European regulation, but also they have been recognized the role of promotion, protection, and other activities. If you're interested, you can look at Article 45.1 of the regulation on agricultural products. Plus, as an element of what we like to call a public policy on geographical indications, GI groups are entitled to do promotion, but the state, the legislator, can also provide funds for promotional activities. And this is the case of the European Union as well, which is an interesting example. And if you join forces with groups from different countries and different sectors for promotional activities in third markets, you can get reimbursed up to 80% of the overall budget. So this is extremely interesting to get your GI known in Asia, Latin America, and all the emerging markets. Controls, which is also a fundamental element. Again, we go back to Article 36 of the European regulation, because that's quite important. Before a product is commercialized, even before it's put on the market, it has to be controlled in order to verify that what you have put in the product specification is basically delivered to the consumers. And these controls have to be independent. I put this as an example. It's not every country should find its own model, but we believe that the internal control by the producers is important, but also some sort of external independent control can be also fundamental. We know, for instance, in Mexico, there is a possibility for the Consejo itself to do the Consejo Regulador del Tequila on top of promotion, legal defense, has been entrusted to do also controls, and this works very well. So it's also an alternative you can look at as a success for implementing controls. And finally, sustainability. I've already mentioned, this new spirit, new trends of social, combining economic performances with social and environmental considerations. But here again, I think a public policy is important because, of course, every GI should look at what kind of responses to sustainability they can do. Ideally, we are working with the FAO on this, and we help our members to work within specific sectors, in the sense that, the sector of coffee, for instance, has different issues in terms of sustainability with respect to wine and spirits, or with respect to meat products. But I think it's important for, again, as an element of public policy, for the legislator to identify some general objectives that can also help producers then to basically find their way into this new trend, because there are also a lot of private initiatives by retailers, by private companies. And I think, again, it's important that the public authorities, they identify the key priorities, and then the producers, they work at the local level. And again, GIs offer an opportunity to scale up, because once you have identified your priorities, either within the product specification or within parallel control, parallel certifications, which respond to sustainability, then all the producers of the GI will implement that. So doing it within a GI, embark on sustainability adventure within a GI has also the potential to scale up the potential effects. In conclusion, it's important to have a solid organizational and institutional structure for the success of GIs, meaning you need solid association of producers, which should be created from day one in line with national legislations. If the state is the right holder, of course, structure can be put in place to delegate certain activities to the associations, and the whole institutional framework, which is not just a legislation, but also an approach, also like the creation of, for instance, an administrative authority for enforcement, giving specific guidelines to an IP office also to prevent some of the trademark applications in conflict with GIs to be registered, to have a public policy for support of promotion, for sustainability. So all these elements, I think, are crucial for the success of geographical indications.